Is there a couple programs though that you could specifically sort of highlight for us and just sort of unpack them a little bit, like on a specific that sort of stand out or that sort of is a explainable program? Because of course we have lots of people watching from outside the industry. Is there a couple you could highlight?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm not sure if I really made this clear at all, but really the way part of the three buckets I think you were referring to before, was measurement, mitigation, and monitoring. Those are really three critical pieces to how you manage methane. So we could add more M words in there if we tried, but maybe for now we'll keep it to measurement, mitigation, monitoring of methane. So there's two programs in particular that I mentioned previously, but only in passing. And this baseline and reduction opportunity assessment, or BROA, as it's famously called with its acronym, it is really focused on the measurement side of things. And that is getting some baseline information that identifies the equipment that's on site and the related emissions with some of the leaks and vents on site, and getting a comprehensive inventory. There's a gas measurement component to that program as well. But this is really great because this is a collaborative effort between industry and the service providers to go after these funds through the BROA program. And it's a really smart program for the government to have implemented because we have over 450 producers here in the province of Alberta. It's a very significant number. So you want to get as many of those producers into the space where they're understanding their methane emissions profile. And it's impossible to do in the absence of getting a baseline set of information. So that's what this program does. It supports the baseline data collection. And you'll probably hear Darcy talk about baseline and implementation because that's the world that he's living in right now. Get the baseline, understand where you're at today, and then you can make a good decision around the implementation. Which projects are you going to pursue? The information you get out of the BROA program, what you want to do is you want to layer over top of that the regulatory obligations that a company has, then identify the projects you need to do to be compliant with regulations in the future. And then you want to layer on top of that whether or not any of these projects identified can generate revenue from carbon offsets. Then you want to layer on top of that whether or not there's other funding programs out there like MTIP, which I'll talk about, and the ERF, the Emissions Reduction Fund, which is the federal fund, that would support the installation of the equipment to complete those projects. So this BROA piece is really, really important. And it's a $10 million program right now that just kicked off here about a week and a half ago. The next piece that I talked about is the implementation. And so this MTIP program, Methane Technology Implementation Program, is specifically that. It's a $15 million program funded by the government of Alberta that is focused on deployment of technologies to reduce emissions, create jobs, and those things that we talked about in the province of Alberta. So that's been established now. I guess what are we looking at? A couple months here. It's been operating since about the end of September 25th. It was announced. There's obviously a learning curve for producers to understand what the process is, but essentially, Jared, it's an application process. There's 9 defined project types that are eligible, but there's a 10th category called other. So if you don't see a project type on there, you can apply for a certain project type if you meet the parameters. But whether you're looking at pneumatic device conversions, whether you're looking at compressor vent gas capture or other vent capture from tanks, for example, those are all qualifying project types. And you submit your application. The team at Carbon Connect reviews the application and determines whether or not you qualify for the grant allocation. So really sharp to have these two programs kind of working together, and then layer on top of that $675 million from the federal government for implementation as well. A little bit different of a process over there, but they've just designed it a little bit differently. Regardless, it's for access to technologies that will reduce emissions in the system.
So those programs, are they, and it's really, yeah, it is going to be nice to have both organizations featured on the show and then keep tying it all together. We have Joy Romero from CRIN coming on as well, so it's going to be another layer at each stage of implementation on sort of different on a different side though. Are those I'll try to get the name right, the BROA one and the MTIP one, are you, so did you say you actually Mila gets to be part of writing that program and use sort of all that knowledge? Like, do you have a seat at the table? Do you get a review? How does that sort of work to get that program into a place where you feel it can provide value to every stream of or every stakeholder?
Yeah, the government went through a process of stakeholder engagement. So we were one of many stakeholders that they engaged with on this process. So they had a framework in mind, and they wanted to get specific input into what each of these stakeholders would look for in a program. And then they're going and doing what they need to from there, and to take this input and build a program that suits their needs on a timeline, and that kind of stuff. So yeah, we were very fortunate to be, providing feedback to the government, to be providing specific design ideas and things of that nature. And industry was doing that as well because they were asked, and whether that's individual companies, whether that's CAP or EPAC, those organizations. So there's a lot of involvement here. The Alberta Energy Regulator gets involved because they have a need around data collection, data management, so that we want to make sure there's no cross-threading here that's stepping on feet, so to speak. And really, the government did a heck of a good job of engaging with folks. And like I say, we were very fortunate to be a part of that process.